Me too, I guess.
Well, I'm so pleased to have Kelly Strong presenting today. We at BoulderNet think very, very highly of Workforce Boulder County, and Kelly is new to Workforce Boulder County, and we are anxious to hear what she has to tell us. Kelly, I'll let you further introduce yourself.
Great. I think I just shared my screen. I want to confirm that
Yep.
folks can see it.
Yep.
Yep, looks
Great.
great.
Awesome. That's good to know. Yeah, I am going to try to talk fast because I actually prepared quite a bit for you folks. But if I don't get through all of it, I did send a PDF of these slides to Dawn and Trent, and I think they put them on the Facebook page. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and we can go. Yeah, I did, and we can
Okay.
go past 10:30 if you need to.
Okay, whatever works for folks. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I really enjoyed being here for the introductions and getting to hear what everybody is up to and where folks are looking for work. And I love just the idea of BoulderNet, the fact that this is kind of a grassroots organization of folks getting together to help one another. I think that's really, really, really cool. So my presentation today is sort of a mix-up of a couple things. I teach quite a few workshops at Workforce Boulder County. So if you've attended some of our career workshops, I actually recognized some names here today that I've seen in workshops before. So nice to see you again. Um, and today I wanted to kind of share a little bit about my story and my career transition from being a public educator to moving into the government space and all of the stuff that goes along with that. So I'm hopeful that some folks that are here today are interested in healing about or learning about kind of this healing and recovery from a work experience that maybe wasn't so great. And just to know that there is some hope on the other side. So that's what I would like to share with you today. My story kind of woven in with quite a few resources that I hope will be helpful to many of you. So a little background on me and my career. I grew up here in Boulder County. My family's been in Boulder County for 4 generations on one side and 5 on the other. So I am like a Boulder County native. I went to Niwot schools. I graduated from CU. And then I decided I wanted to get the heck out of Boulder County. And it was in a time that teaching was actually quite hard to get into. Imagine that, not actually a teacher shortage. It was difficult to find a job as a high school social studies teacher. So I actually took a job in Dove Creek, Colorado. Anyone ever heard of that? Christine seems to know. Yeah, it's as far south and west as you can get in this state. It's basically Utah. So we were 8 miles from the western Colorado border and essentially in the Four Corners area. If you're familiar with Cortez, Four Corners, Mesa Verde area, that's where
Nice.
Dove Creek is. It's a town of 800 people. And so I was 22 years old and moved down there, didn't know a soul, and started teaching in a 6 through 12 school with only about 100 kids in the whole school. And then from there, I continued on my education journey. I taught in Harris County, Texas, which is where Houston is, for a couple years, and quickly realized that Texas was not the place for me, and it was time to come back to Colorado. I was an instructional coach with the San Juan BOCES. A BOCES is a board of cooperative educational services. Essentially, they provide special education supports for small rural school districts who can't necessarily afford everything they need to be in compliance with special education law. So I worked there as an instructional coach, and then I came back to Boulder County and taught in NED for 5 years. I taught everything from middle school English to high school social studies at the advanced placement level, AP US history, world history, AP psychology, kind of a jack of all trades. I coached softball, volleyball, track, knowledge bowl, sponsored classes, did student council, all the stuff that a young teacher gets involved in. And I love, love, love teaching. I love being able to share my passion and my excitement with other folks. And so I've always really, really loved teaching. And that's why my transition was especially difficult. So I want to talk a little bit about that transition and some of what I experienced, especially teaching during COVID, which I think is pretty relatable to folks in other industries, just what it was like to continue on with your day-to-day when it felt like the world was falling apart around you. So this is kind of a question for the group to consider. Anyone ever experienced any of these things in a job? raise your hand, throw something in the chat, just so I know folks are maybe with me. In education, especially during COVID, these are some of the things that I experienced. I felt very undervalued. I was exhausted all the time. Yep, I see lots of hands going up. Yeah, so lots of folks can relate to this. My anxiety and depression was through the roof, and I was like the definition of burnt out. There was just so much happening with COVID and with the needs of young adults in our community at that time. I'm sure that folks have read all the headlines, which I have on my next slide, about the crisis that became public education during the pandemic. And I also experienced a lot of these, sleepless nights and nightmares about work, worrying about my kids, worrying about if they were safe and warm and fed at home, right? And then a lot of that like impact on personal relationships, right? So I was seeing that I was putting so much into my job that I had nothing left for my loved ones. And that was really, really difficult for me. I put this up here not to make you feel sympathy or empathy for me, but to recognize that a lot of people have these experiences in the workplace, and that it's not just you and it's not just me who have them. So I think that normalizing the fact that this happens in the workplace quite a bit is something that's important to do, particularly in groups like this, right? Where we're here to support each other and help one another. Just acknowledging how bad things can be, I think, can be a really huge support to others, just to know that, you're not alone in this. So these are some of the things that kind of drove me to the edge in teaching with COVID. I just kind of pulled some pictures of news articles about all the things that started to change in the public education system when COVID was happening. This sense of there being absolutely no boundary. So we were kind of expected to respond to and support and do and email and take care of things at any hour of the day. It was kind of like school never turned off, and parents and administrators really expected us to be sort of on call all the time. And there was kind of like this sort of level of gaslighting if you weren't, right? Like, if you're not responding the way that you should, do you even care about your students? Are you really a good teacher? Are you here for the right reasons? That kind of stuff started to come up quite a bit. I recognized how in the public school system, this level of compliance became more important than really anything else, right? Like, kids should listen and sit in their chairs and be compliant little people, regardless of what was going on in the world around them, right? Like, there was a ton of trauma happening to my students, and they weren't okay. So I wasn't okay because I was the one they came to and said, here's what's happening at home. Here's what's happening in another classroom. I had kids crying in my classroom every single day for years, honestly. That added pressure that came from parents and administrators because, after COVID or during COVID, test scores were way down and kids were falling behind, and the social emotional state of kids was not good, right? All of that became added pressure on teachers, particularly teachers like me that did care so much about their students and who was so involved in everything that was happening in the school. In addition to all those things, right, we were kind of expected to become healthcare workers. So when students were wearing their masks improperly during the very beginnings of COVID, right, they had their masks below their nose. I was responsible for making sure that they wore their masks and correctly. And if they didn't, I had to send them to the principal's office, and then they'd come right back not wearing their masks correctly again. Also, while knowing that I had immunocompromised students in the room or students who had immunocompromised parents at home. And all of this kind of fell on me, right? So that's all the COVID stuff. And then in the midst of all the COVID stuff, a lot of the political came up as well. I was a high school social studies teacher. I taught AP US history. So, in a community like Nederland and in Boulder County, it wasn't like things are in Alabama, right, or Florida, where there's all this politicization of education. But a lot of things felt more political and more emotionally charged, I think, than they'd been in the past. And all of this stuff had just sort of been weighing on me, right, for quite some time. So the ultimate consequence became this. I was so stressed, I was so anxious, I had chronic headaches daily. I was on medicated for anxiety and depression. I had a ton of gastrointestinal issues. And the final straw for me was actually being sent immediately to the ER by my doctor when I'd had a stomach illness that just wouldn't go away. And I went to check in and see how things were and see if I was going to be okay or not. And she said, I want you to immediately go to the ER and get some tests run. I think you might be having an appendicitis or gallstones. So I spent an entire morning in the ER running every test they could think of, and they found nothing wrong with me physically. And as soon as the doctor said that, I burst into tears and started hysterically crying because I knew that that meant this is all happening in my mind and it's all impacting my body, right? So I learned quite a bit about the mind-body connection and the impact that residual stress and accruing stress can have on the body. I got to the point, like it says right there, where you're beaten down physically and emotionally, you can't make good decisions, and you're in this cycle of just abusing your body. Angela, I would also highly recommend that book, The Body Keeps Score. It's really, really, really great and exactly what I'm talking about right now. I realized that I'd spent years ignoring my body and not listening to what it was trying to tell me. And finally, it was screaming at me. Something has to change. So within a week of that ER visit, I quit my job. It was in January of 2023. So I did leave mid-year, which was really, really, really awful and really difficult, and something that I don't think I ever would have done had my health not been at stake. So all of this kind of comes together to this place, right, where my body was telling me I needed to change. My relationships around me were starting to be impacted. I was unwell, but I loved my job. I loved my students. I loved being the person that they came to. I loved being their support system and their network. And it was absolutely devastating for me to leave them. But it was the only option at this point. I was so ill and my body had taken on so much stress for so long that there was no other option. So these are some of my students. On my last day, they made this big sign. They put it on the front of the school. Everybody signed it. It wasn't like the, I quit in the middle of the year because I hate everything and my leaving is a very bad, awful scenario. I still have really close relationships with people in NED, students, parents, all of those things. And I am in contact with these cuties all the time. But I knew I had to do what was best for me. And it was very, very difficult. Thanks, Rebecca, for the kudos in the chat. And I came to this place that I think some of you might also connect to, where people around me were asking, why is it such a big deal? Why are you so stressed about work? Why does it impact you so much? It's just a job. Anybody else have that experience? It just, it felt like I was doing something wrong because I cared too much, right? And so that was something that really, really struck me, was maybe it's me. Maybe any Taylor Swift fans in the house, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. It felt like maybe it was something that I was doing wrong, that I couldn't establish boundaries and that I, took too large of a role in my student's life or whatever. But to be told this, right? It's just a job. Why is it such a big deal? Really devalues the amount of myself that I'd put into my job, right? Sometimes a job can be just a job, but for a lot of us, it can be a lot more. And there are many layers to work, right? So when you leave a job on your own terms or on someone else's, it can bring about a ton of emotions, right? It can feel like a grief or loss. It really felt like a breakup to me, like I was breaking up with teaching and I had to recover from it. I didn't know who I was without being a teacher. Being a teacher had become so much of my identity over the past 12 years of my life that I felt like a huge part of me had been sort of ripped away. I felt shame for leaving mid-year and abandoning my kids. And that shame and guilt was absolutely brought upon by several of my colleagues who refused to speak to me after I'd resigned, even though I still taught for several weeks after that. My depression really took a hit again as well. And what I really lost, I think, was my self-confidence. There was a time in which I would tell colleagues, friends, family members that I was the best version of myself in my classroom because it really defined who I was and where I was the most confident. So I was just really uneasy, uneven, off balance when all of this transpired, right? So I want to say to folks that have experienced something similar, um, it's okay for your job to be a part of your identity. It's okay to want to have a valuable contribution in your life and for your job to be that. For so many of us, our work really matters and makes a difference. And I've heard that from some of you in your introductions today, in that, I want to work in nonprofit, I want to be a part of my community, I want to help, right? Um, that's okay, right? That's okay to care so much about your job, and it's okay for your job to be a part of your identity, as long as it's not negatively impacting you in this sort of toxic way. And ultimately, where I got to, and what was so scary for me in thinking about doing something else, anything else, was this. I was so afraid that I wouldn't be good at anything else because I knew I was a good teacher. I knew that I made a difference to my students. And I knew that I was thinking about embarking on something that I wasn't sure about. So I had all of these levels and layers of these emotions that came from the experience of teaching through COVID and this is something that like you've probably read that really has happened to many teachers across the country. Like there is a mass exodus from teaching in K-12 education for a lot of the reasons that I just laid out, right? It's not that I didn't want to be a teacher, I didn't care about my students. It's that I finally, for the first time in my life, started to care about myself. And that was a huge transition for me. So I felt a lot of self-doubt. I felt a lot of insecurity. There was a lot of, again, the gaslighting and the guilt, right? Because in education, the way that they, exactly like the mass exodus in healthcare, right? Um, anytime you tried to express your own emotions or your own feelings or your own needs in education, the response was always, yeah, but we got to do it for the kids. Like that totally invalidated what the rest of us were feeling and what we needed for ourselves. We weren't allowed to be humans. We were teachers first, and maybe humans second or third down the line. So I tell you this whole experience to also kind of make this transition that it took me a while to make, and to recognize that these negative experiences that we have in the workplace really can have future impact if we don't address them and deal with them. So my story continues in a very positive way. I actually had begun the process of applying for jobs as I was recognizing all of my, you know, illnesses and physical issues, as well as emotional and mental. And it did sort of line up that, I quit my job. And then very quickly after that, I was hired on at Workforce Boulder County. So I got really lucky. This doesn't happen for folks a lot of the time, where you're able to leave a position that's been so what's the word, that's taken so much from you, and to be able to move immediately into another job. I got really, really, really lucky in that. I think that Christine also mentioned this. The folks that I work with at Workforce are empathetic and compassionate and caring and considerate. And so I actually did go into the interview talking about the place that I was in and how depressed and anxious and ill that I was, right? That's not what I would recommend to folks, is to jump right from one job to the next and to be able to go right into a new position. I feel like I'm the exception to the rule in that, because I was in no place to be positive and to put my best foot forward. But there was something that my colleagues recognized in me that fit at Workforce. And I'm so, so grateful that it worked out that way, that I did move, pretty immediately right into another job. But in a general sense, and looking back, I probably should have taken some more time to consider what I was experiencing and going through and to heal from it before moving into the next job. Because a lot of us might think, and I thought too, that a new job is a fresh start and you can just leave all the rest of that behind you. Let me tell you that you can't. It doesn't just go away, right? The past will often bleed through if you haven't dealt with it, and it will have future impact, right? Sometimes we feel really negative or really, oops, so sorry about that. Scrolled ahead too hard. We feel negative, or we feel like we're justified in villainizing the experience that we had before. And ultimately, a lot of that negativity can be picked up by a hiring manager or a recruiter if we're moving into another position. And they might think kind of some of the stuff that you're thinking. Well, maybe it's them. Maybe they have the problem. Maybe they're the reason there was conflict, right? And be hesitant to think about making that hire. In addition to that, when we have negative experiences in toxic work environments, it's going to impact the way we make career decisions, right? So think about being in that mindset that I was in and feeling in that space where I was doubting myself and my confidence, right? I felt like I wasn't good enough and that I couldn't do anything else. There were absolutely jobs that I could have applied to that I didn't, right? It limited my self-confidence, and I'd really internalized this not good enough, not competent, no one's going to want to hire me after what had happened before. I felt like I wasn't whole enough to be an employee for anybody, right? And ultimately, beyond the interview, you might also bring some of those behaviors and that negativity from your previous job into the new workplace. And it could have larger long-term impact on your performance and your success in your next career. So my point is, we need to deal with the negative stuff that we've experienced in the past so we don't bring it into our next experience, right? And I imagine that there are some folks in the meeting today that can connect or relate to this voice in our head that tells us, I'm not good enough. Why would anyone hire me? I don't have the skills. I don't have anything to offer. I'm a failure, right? So when we do internalize that, those doubts are often going to come with us into the next job. I'm like looking at all the comments in the chat too and recognizing that folks are feeling this. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like inside your head is the worst place to be. And you say things to yourself that nobody else would ever say to you.
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So unless we deal with these emotions and these feelings, right, we're going to continue them. We're going to carry them with us. We might kind of take on that victim behavior and blame and point fingers, right? And the other piece of it is when you go to interview for the next job, they're going to ask you this question. There is no way to get around this question in an interview, right? It's often like one of the first 3 questions that you're asked. Tell us why you left your last job. And what you don't want to do is probably what I did in my interview, where you walk in and you say, I am just completely burnt out. I am exhausted. It took everything that I have and everything that I am. And I just don't know how I did this for so long, right? For most interviews, this is probably not the best way to go into it, right? And the thing is, we just don't have many opportunities to constructively talk about these experiences that have impacted us so deeply, right? So we need to figure out how we can talk about it and process through these emotions before we get to that interview, right? This is kind of what I'm talking about. So if you're still in that negative space and you're still thinking like, well, I want them to hear my side of the story. I want to justify why I did what I did. My boss was a real jerk, right? These are probably not the best ways to respond in an interview to questions about your previous position, right? So we need to think about how we can address these things in a emotionally neutral way before we go into the interview, right? Yeah, so Diana is mentioning the trauma, right? It's definitely trauma. It's primary and secondary trauma, which I've learned quite a bit about since leaving public education. And then, yes, we do talk about this a lot at Workforce. Most of my presentation today comes from our difficult work histories workshop that I do teach. So if you would be interested in diving into this more, I would love to have you. We teach this workshop once a month. And I'm going to share also some resources and information about how to sign up for our workshops as well today. So thanks for mentioning that. So here's where we make the big transition, right? I really wanted to have you with me and to feel that the emotion and the reality of what I was experiencing as a teacher. And I want to give you the resources that I didn't have to make that processing happen before you move into your next job. So here's the transition piece, right? How do we process these negative emotions? What are ways in which we can do some of this healing and this recovery from our trauma before we move into another position? And these are some ideas, but the ultimate kind of large picture is that we need to practice talking about our last job until it no longer bothers us. And I know that seems like a tall order for some of us, right? Those bad feelings about our previous job will come out in interviews, will come out in networking, and will impact our performance, right? That if all you can talk about is how awful your last job was, that's not the best space to be looking for another job, right? So being able to kind of separate those things, do some healing so that you can move forward is really, really, really important. So some ways in which you can do that, process your experience, talk to people, talk to anyone, talk to your family, talk to your former coworkers, right? Talk to a therapist. I have a wonderful therapist. He's actually in Coal Creek Canyon over there by Christine. I think he's magical and wonderful, and he has literally saved my life. Get some perspective, talk to other folks, join a group like this, where you can talk about these things in a safe environment and connect with other folks who have experienced something similar. That's been really powerful for me in the aftermath of this, is just knowing that somebody else experienced what I did. Because when I was leaving the school, like I said, some teachers just stopped talking to me. They felt like that choice for me to leave had invalidated all the other good that I'd done for the school and for my students, and that I was a failure and a quitter. And that's not true. And it took me a long time to be able to recognize and say that, right? Reevaluate. And this is something that I definitely did, and where I'd really like to lean into the idea of career transition. You don't always have to do the thing that you've always done. And that was huge for me. I put in my background here that I was a career educator because that was the plan. I was going to be a teacher for my entire career. I was going to retire from NED, middle senior high school. And because I didn't do that, and this is a weird perception in education, it might be the same in other fields as well, is that if you don't make it an entire career, it's like you were never a teacher. It's like you were a failed teacher. I taught successfully for 12 years. I had a group of students in which every single kid passed the AP World History exam, 100% pass rate. The national average is 50%. So just by leaving education before I'd spent 30 years there doesn't mean that I'd failed. But from others, it kind of came across that perspective. Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
I was applauding.
Oh, thank you. I thought that was a question.
No.
Thank you.
No,
the reality is you're still a teacher, right?
Yeah, I always got to call it. If I see a hand up, I've got to call on you. Got to. It's in my blood. So reevaluate, right? Think about what your career trajectory and goals might look like. It was really mind-blowing for me to consider that it's okay if I'm not going to be a teacher my entire career. I think a lot of us have this perception that our career is supposed to go like this, right? It's supposed to be, linear. And in reality, I think a lot of us are recognizing now that that's not true. We can have multiple careers throughout our lifetime. And sometimes our career journey goes more like this than like this, right? And that's totally okay. Another thing that I really needed to do in terms of healing was to recharge my support team. Because often when we do talk about these negativities and the things that are bothering us, it comes out in the form of venting to our significant others. And let me tell you, the venting that I was doing and the amount of myself that I was putting into my classroom and my school was taking away from my relationships at home. I don't have kids, but it was impacting my partner and our relationship, because I just felt like I was never here. Even when I was here physically, emotionally and mentally, I was elsewhere, and that wasn't fair. So I've really spent some time investing in my relationships and thanking the people that stood by me and helped me get to this point, and also the people that helped me by saying, Kelly, you have to do something different. It is time for you to leave the classroom, right? Also, to think about taking care of yourself. By the time that I quit my job teaching, I'd forgotten what taking care of myself meant. I didn't know what I enjoyed. I didn't know what made me laugh or feel inspired or feel good. And it took a while to remember those things. So maybe that's a place for folks to start, right? What are some things that bring you joy? What does joy feel like in your body? What does joy look like? Because a lot of us get to a point where we totally forget that. Some other questions and ideas for processing a past work experience. Think about the person you were before. What has this job taken from you? What have you gained back now that you're no longer in that position? I had lost every sense of patience that I had. I used to consider myself a patient person, and I do now. But when I was in the worst of my educational experience, the slightest thing would just throw me off. And I would snap at my students, and I would snap at my partner, because I just didn't have that capacity for emotional regulation, right? The things that were taken from me, my time, my energy, my confidence, my ability to take care of myself, all of those things were taken from me, right? And then moving into the last couple questions, what kind of person do you want to be now, and what do you want to reclaim? Those were the things that I was really looking to reclaim. Trent, did you have a question?
Oh, no, a comment. I mean, my sense is that you self-define yourself as a teacher, and my sense is that you're still a teacher, right? You've just moved to a healthier venue, a healthier venue for yourself, right? That the venue you were in became unhealthy, so you moved out of that environment, but you're still fundamentally a teacher, right? And just right. I mean, quite often it comes up in BoulderNet that people talk about ageism, and they also talk about wanting to do a pivot, right?
Yep.
Which, in my mind is essentially kind of what you did, right?
Yep. Exactly.
You had gotten to a place where what you were doing was you still liked doing, but the environment was bad, and so you did what was essentially a pivot, right?
Yep, exactly.
So,
that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. So thanks for leading into
sorry.
it. No, great job. This is good.
Yeah.
So to Trent's point, right, this is what I did. I thought about the things that I valued, and the things that didn't line up with what I valued in my current working environment, right? I cared so much about helping others and supporting others and sharing my perspective and my knowledge with other people, right? And I didn't even see it. What's interesting at this point, Trent, is I felt like I was doing something completely new and different. It didn't feel like I was making a small pivot, which I really was. It felt like leaving education was the biggest jump that I'd ever taken. But I moved into a position that literally has the same title. I'm a community educator, right? I am still teaching, but it feels so different because the environment is so different. And the value that really drove this more than anything for me, and I've mentioned this already, was as a teacher, I didn't feel like I was treated as a human. I couldn't go to the bathroom when I wanted to. I couldn't call in sick because it was so much more work to not go than to just be there, right? Like I could not address my human needs because they conflicted with my responsibilities as a teacher. And that was huge, right? So that's probably the biggest thing that I have gained back and that I have really, really connected to in terms of my values, is that I am treated like a human now. My supervisor actually sends her emails and she says, "Hello, humans." And I know that she doesn't do that because I want to be a human, but it really does align better. I would really encourage folks to think about, what do you value? And then consider if the type of work and the environment in which you are working or looking to work in is in alignment with that. I think a lot of times we compromise our values for a job. And then we have this internal conflict that's always kind of nagging at us, right? So this was something that was really important to me. I don't know how important it might be to other folks, but we also offer a career exploration workshop at Workforce Boulder County that really does exactly this, helps you to identify and define what your values are and to match those with potential options for future workplaces, careers, jobs, whatever, right? Yeah, Lisa, not taking time off because you were afraid to, even if you really needed to, that inner conflict is what I'm talking about. So identifying those values, connecting with them, and by doing so, you'll really reconnect with who you are. I think I mentioned this already, but by the time that I had quit teaching in the public education system, I'd forgotten about the things that brought me joy and the things that I loved. I stopped doing the things that made me happy because I became so consumed with what I needed to do in my responsibilities. So this is also a really important part of the healing process, is reconnecting with who you are, your own intrinsic value, being able to say, I am hireable. I am capable of doing a job. I do have skills that would be relevant and that would contribute to a workplace, right? Because these jobs that take so much from us can drain our inspiration. They can leave us feeling physically and emotionally depleted. And I want everyone to hear this when I say it. That tired and frustrated you is not the version of yourself that you want to bring into your next career, your next job, your next anything. It's not who you really are, right? So spend the time, invest in yourself so that you can know who you are and what you value, and make sure that the choices that you're making align to that, right? And there's lots of ways to do this. You can practice some mindfulness, meditation, exercising, just again, finding those things that fill you up and listening to your body in that. Doing things that make your body feel good ultimately are going to make you feel good inside and out, right? So I'm getting to the end of my talk, and I know that folks might have some questions, but I'm just going to kind of cruise through these last couple things. I've already kind of mentioned this, right? Evaluate yourself in the experience, make a list of what you've done well, think about what you like to do, what brings you joy, and that idea of value and connecting it to your next work experience. A lot of us need help with rebuilding confidence after an experience that was negative. We encourage folks at Workforce Boulder County to write a master resume, which I'm not sure if folks are super familiar with that idea here or not, but just kind of an accounting of every single thing you've done that you can then build tailored resumes off of. And really, it's just an exercise in what have I done? Where have I been? What are my skills? What are my qualifications? What are my accomplishments? What have I done well? So being able to do that. Thinking about positive feedback or like evaluations and reviews that you have received. I have a whole box of letters from students that I used to read when I was having a really bad day at school. And I still read them. They still make me remember the impact that I had that was positive. So think about ways you can do that. List your accomplishments. And if that's even too hard for you, we have the best resources on our website, Workforce Boulder County's career resources. I'll put those in the chat for you real quick. From that page, you can take all of these assessments that are listed here. And they're all ones that just come up with like traits about yourself. So if you take the Indigo Pathway assessment, it's really just a kind of career and job assessment. Hold on just a second. I'm going to put these links in the chat real fast, if I can find it. There you go. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, oops, I sent that to Kathy on accident. Now it's to everybody. Indigo Pathway is really cool because it comes up with these DISC traits, meaning like the way that you fall on certain categories of like basic personality traits. So it's similar to like the Myers-Briggs 16 personalities. It'll say that you are really a person who's really invested in like a social aspect. So you should go into work that really connects to folks needing something from you and supporting them in a certain way. So I would recommend all of these assessments. Indigo Pathway, 16 Personalities, and Truity are all free, and they're on that website. And that's just a way to kind of reinvest in yourself too. Like, oh, in this assessment, it says that I'm really organized. That's a skill or something that I am really capable of. And it can help remind you of what you do have to offer. Upskilling and reskilling through Workforce Boulder County. We can also provide a free subscription to LinkedIn Learning. If you're interested in that, send me an email and I will connect you with the right folks. Think about learning something new, building that growth mindset and being a lifelong learner. All of that can help you to reinvest in yourself as well. Find a mentor or someone to kind of help you with this inspiration kind of piece that you might have lost. Think about shifting some of the negative experiences that you've had to the positive. When you have a little distance between that negative experience and where you are now, you might be able to think back with a little bit more objectivity. Maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe that argument I got into with my boss was about something else. And coming out of that and being able to have a positive relationship with my boss afterwards shows that I was able to learn and grow from that experience, right? So think about some of the experiences that you might have considered negative at the time and see if you can put a positive spin on them, right? That's going to help set us up well for the interview space, where it's critical to focus on the positive and to leave some of the negative behind us. So my end slide for this presentation is a ton of resources. I'd love to leave you guys with some additional things. These are all articles that are about exactly the topic that I've covered, that toxic work culture, moving on from a bad work experience, etc. And then the right side is all about some of the supports that are provided in the state of Colorado. So I wanted to give all of that to you. And then I want to pause real quick because the rest of my slides are just about workforce services. So I can go into those if you'd like me to, but I want to just leave an opportunity for folks to ask any questions they have, and also acknowledge that we're past 10:30 right now. Any questions or any thoughts about anything that I've talked about so far?
Yes, I have something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dealing with this with I mean, not exact same, not the same situation, but I can relate because I'm dealing with due to family and personal situations, with other family members, helping out in different things. I've been out, work for a bit now, so I'm dealing with trying to go back in, and also, with that, working with that my confidence as well, and also because keeping myself up, you know. I mean, even though I'm generally a positive person, but just continuously keeping it up, building the confidence, and also the feeling of even what something happened, like what happened a few years ago, and that kind of upped the ante of the expectations or the demands in terms of even what you were saying in your job. But it's multiple ways it can happen, and it's like, okay, well, not being away and then going back in, it's like, that's like, oh wow, I'm gonna have to up the ante of my preparedness of of being up to speed, like almost and then with other things, like that's been going on, like you said, health issues and stuff. So maybe in certain, you know what I mean, both physical and mental. So it's like, okay, it's like it almost feeling like where I've been 0 is like to 100. So it's or you know what I mean, 99 or whatever, getting back in, and back up to that level of speed. Should I go back into the same type of thing? Should I try to find something a bit in between, not quite as fast paced, all that sort of a thing? If you have any thoughts, or anyone else does.
Yeah, I would just say kind of the message that I've said is to invest in yourself, to take that time, right, of thinking about what it is that really is going to inspire you and light you up and make you feel fulfilled. and try to find work that aligns to that. I'm really thinking a lot about alignment in my life right now. I actually had a great conversation with my therapist about it this week, and how things are so much more aligned right now in my life than they were a year ago. And that a year ago, the Kelly from a year ago would not believe where the Kelly today is, right? As far as healing and recovery and making this choice for myself. I think above all else, that was what was most important, as I began living my life for myself and not for somebody else. So I hope that helps you a little bit, but thanks for sharing. And I did. Oh, go ahead.
One thing when I was off that allowed me, Kelly was talking about, contributing. I mean, one of the things I used to do HR, right? And compensation is part of HR, right? And compensation is not just salary, but
Yes.
everything you get from your work experience, right? So that's obviously, your salary, but it's also benefits, but it's also the work environment, right?
Yeah,
it's
totally.
your total work experience, right? And so when you're between jobs, clearly you're not getting your salary, you're not getting your health benefits, et cetera, but you're also not getting the opportunity to contribute, right? So where I'm going, Ada, is, if right now you're kind of feeling like you're out of the game, right? So, when I was out of employment, I started volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that really gave me an opportunity to feel like I was back contributing, and to utilize those skills and utilize my brain and really get involved with an organization and feel like I was really contributing again. So if that helps you to feel like you can exercise those skills, those mental skills, those organizational skills, whatever skills you're feeling like are kind of getting fallow, you might consider that. So anyway, one idea.
I would also add to that, Trent, that volunteering can also be a great place to put in your resume when you are out of work, right? To like cover one of those gaps in your resume. People are always worried about having huge gaps in their resume. And I encourage folks to highlight the things that they did during that time. So maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's getting a certification, learning a new skill. I know Christine was just talking about a new certification that she'd earned, right? So filling in that space and that time with some things that are, again, going to like build you up and kind of make you a better version of yourself, even if it's just in your own eyes, right? That might be the most important part of it. So thanks for sharing that.
You meet a whole bunch of new people, right? It's a networking.
Absolutely. Whole new networks.
Yeah.
Christine has her hand up. Go ahead.
And Christine would like to say thanks so much for saying this, because what I hear more than anything else is hope.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how often during any of my job searches I've felt, I'm the scum of the earth. No, I'm lower than the scum of the earth. I'm not a person. I'm not real. I don't belong here. We all know these feelings. We all know these feelings. And it sounds like you have too. And you're back. You're back. You're showing us that it is possible to come back. And that says a lot to me. So thank you very much for being as vulnerable as you've been, and for offering us the help that I know you're about to give us from Workforce Boulder County.
Thank you, Christine. And Steve just asked about programs and stuff too. I can go into that in just a second. I'm going to let Diana go first, and then I can move into those.
Kelly, thank you for teaching, but I also know how much of a drag that is. That gets glorified sometimes too much. I mean, we all need our teachers, but we need to treat them much, much better than we actually do. Mm-hmm. I am a graduate, almost 30 years from Netherland Junior Senior High School.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
Gosh, next year, June, it will be 30 years. So quite the influence from a teacher. So I'm sure you've had impact on your students, just like the teachers that I had impact on me still to this day. I feel like there's a lot of, about 5 years ago, I was in such a toxic environment. It actually mimicked a lot of the personal stuff I grew up with. The manager would treat me very similar to how my grandmother would treat me.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing when your grandmother treats you like scum of the earth, like Christine was just mentioning. So it took me about a year and a half to kind of get myself like recognized and out of that job. And I, since then, have found something that is allowing me to be more seen and recognized in my work. And I am now making that transition also with, I also had a lot of assistance with the like Reiki and meditation and finding out who I am. So it's taken a lot of unconditioning, and it's and I have to continue to uncondition myself from all of the, I don't know, what society says we need to do and how we need to do things. So there's a lot that comes into this. So thank you.
Thank you. You might know my friend Al Real. Was he one of your teachers at Ned?
I graduated in '94, so I don't know.
I think that's right around when he started. He just retired. I was just curious. That's funny.
Nice.
Thanks for being here, Laura. I recognized your name. So if anyone's interested, I can just go through real quick the workforce resources, and because I know folks need to go and things, but if that works for people, is that what we're interested in? A little bit more resources, workforce stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure,
So yeah,
please.
and these are all in the presentation too. I just threw this together from another one of our workforce presentations. Again, kind of like our overall comprehensive career services stuff. I know that Trent mentioned a lot of this earlier, but we do provide funding for training and certifications under about a couple $1,000 within about an 18-month period. We do have funding for that. It is connected to your local workforce center though. So if you're joining us from outside of Boulder County, you will have to access those funds with your local workforce center. But if you do live in Boulder County, we can help with that. We have opportunities for work-based learning, which is essentially an opportunity to get on-the-job training and to learn the skills and learn a job while also being compensated for it. It's kind of like an internship, but you're being paid. And then we actually are the ones who fund that as well. We have great support and coaching. If you do like enlist in our services by filling out this interest form here, you would be connected to a career support specialist, and they would be kind of like your guide through things. We also do have career coaching in-house as well as throughout the state of Colorado in the Workforce Network. We have a learning lab for folks looking to get a GED. We also have a computer training center where you can engage in some of those certification workloads as well. Christine, go ahead. You're muted. Christine, you're still muted.
And unmuting is a skill. I'm putting it on my resume.
I learned it a lot.
Yeah. I did get a certification through Workforce Boulder County, for which I'm very grateful. And I think I've uncovered an opportunity with a nonprofit, which I could convert into a 1 day a week kind of internship.
Oh, cool.
And the problem is the nonprofit is in Jefferson County.
Okay.
Nuts and boltsy kind of question. How would that work for Boulder County?
Do you live in Boulder County or do you live in Jefferson County in Cole?
I live in Boulder. You know how it is up here.
I know
Two
how it is.
steps and
It
you're in
depends where you
Jefferson.
are on the road, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. It might.
Who would be able to talk to me about it? I realize you may not have the answer.
Yeah, my colleague Lisa Jensen is
Uh-huh.
probably the person to reach out to. Let me look up her email address real quick and share that.
And it was Sophia Stevens who walked me through my initial certification. And I thought about getting in touch with her.
She's actually, because she's on Lisa's team. If you've already been working with Sophia, go ahead and just ask her. She'll be able to.
I'll hit up Sophia then.
Great.
Can I ask a question also?
Yeah.
I did sorry. When I went to the workforce office on Tuesday, that was the medical thing. Did you offer, or is there training for medical coding there? Or like you say, you offer to pay for training, or there are?
So the best way to get answers to questions like that, because it's specific to, again, the program, the cost of it, if you live in Boulder County, all that stuff. So the best way to just get started with us is to fill out this interest form. And I'll put that in the chat as well so folks can access it.
I'm actually in Jefferson County.
Oh, okay. So then for funding, that is funneled through your local workforce center and it's based on where you live. So Jefferson County would have to do that for you. But I imagine that they also have a similar way of getting in touch. Ours is an interest form. I'm going to copy the link to it real quick. But yeah, anything with funding, you're going to have to go through your local workforce center.
So what it's called, Jefferson County Workforce? Is that what I would
If you
look at?
Google that, you can also just look up workforce centers in Colorado.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Lisa says that they have a great workforce center. Oops, sorry. That's not Lisa Jensen. That's our interest form. Just remove Lisa Jensen from that.
Sorry.
So that's the link in there. But for Jefferson County, I can just look it up for you.
So the one that Lisa Jensen posted is,
That's ours.
okay.
Jeffco Workforce Center. Visit. Yep, here it is. Here's their website.
I mean, I keep playing with the teaching idea, but you've scared me away.
I didn't intend to do that.
Well, I mean, at 64, I don't know if that's the best move for me anyway.
Kids can be a little mean sometimes.
I mean,
the other things that I just wanted to share with you guys, we do have workshops. We teach them twice a week. Our schedule is on our website. These are all of the workshops that we teach in terms of career stuff. We do have a career exploration that's also taught in Spanish. These are all in English. Each of them count as a unemployment insurance work search activity. So you can kind of kill two birds with one stone there. We also offer financial workshops that are great. You know, based on kind of what stage in your life you might be in. My colleague Marcia teaches most of these. There's information to contact on there. And again, you guys have all these slides. We do have a home ownership training class that qualifies you for some funds in Boulder County if you're looking to purchase a home. And then I think, Jewel, this might answer your other question. These are some of the things that our computer training center can do. So you can work on your computer skills. There are some certifications and programs you can work through with our service navigators in our computer training center. And so emailing them would be a great place to start as well. ctcinfo@bouldercounty.org or gov. We're in the middle of our transition. And then this is also how you would reach out if you'd like access to LinkedIn Learning.
oh, I sent that to you, but then again, if I'm in Jefferson, you probably have to refer me to someone else.
You
But
can
I
take
love
our
the picture
workshops.
of the Pomeranian. Oh.
Anybody can take our workshops. It's just the funding that's going to be connected to your local workforce center. And
Well,
Diana,
I sent you an email to get to that LinkedIn. Would there be someone you could refer me to in Jefferson?
we can get you access to LinkedIn Learning. That's available to anybody.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep. And Diana, we do teach a workshop called Remote Work. Will it work for me? And we do talk about gig jobs in that workshop. That'd be the most connected workshop I could refer you to right now.
Because I think a few months ago, there was something that I think the Boulder Networking Group had talked about, you know, finding that, because that's the future, right? Of not necessarily working for one employer and, you know, kind of pulling those pieces together, but how do you create a resume for that? Or how do you, you know, set yourself up to that? So it's not necessarily remote work, but it's interacting with different individuals through different companies. So you're not relying on one employer to provide everything for you.
Yep. We also have a workshop titled The Future of Work, and we talk more about like the skills and the industries that are going to be most relevant moving forward. And that's all based on the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report from 2020.
Okay. Nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Trent, go ahead.
Kelly, do you quite often, at least in my history, between work, it's come up with, hey, Trent, you know, do you want to do a little consulting, right? You know, can we hire you, right? And in the past, I've just done it, right? But then in my last job, I did HR, but I also did contracting. And during the contracting, I realized, you know, how vulnerable I had been when I just did a little bit of consulting, right? Because if you know, get a comma in the wrong place or a decimal point in the wrong place, suddenly you've got all this liability, right? And so you guys do a workshop for people that do a little consulting in terms of, you know, protecting yourself from liability or E&O insurance or liability, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
We don't go into that. In the remote work workshop, we talk about kind of the difference between being like a full-time W-2 employee and being a contract employee and
Yep.
the tax differences. That's as far as we go into it, but there is at least a little discussion of that. We
Okay.
don't talk about insurance and liability at all, or about like making yourself into an LLC, which is, I think, recommended if you're going to be doing contract work like that. So we don't have a workshop totally connected to that, but if there's interest, that might be something we could think about putting together.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks for asking. Yeah. And then this is again just our access. So we do have an office in Longmont and an office in Boulder. Our interest form is again linked here. And then if you're just looking to get involved in the workforce at all, you can go ahead and call our service navigators or send an email to our general workforce line. We have a Facebook and a LinkedIn that aren't monitored super closely, but there is some stuff that's posted on there occasionally, namely events and things that we are up to and things that are happening around workforce. So that's
And
all
are you guys
for you. Thanks for
primarily,
taking the extra time.
yeah, Kelly, are you guys primarily virtual at this point? Or are you guys kind of 50-50?
We are in person 4 days a week. Our offices are open Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 4:30. But we do offer all sorts of virtual services. All of our workshops are currently virtual. You can meet with any of us anytime virtually, but we do have that flexibility. You can go into our offices or, connect with us over Microsoft Teams or Zoom.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Any final questions for Kelly? We're way over time.
I know. Sorry about that.
No. We appreciate you staying long. I kind of let the intros go long, so it's my fault.
No
any final questions for Kelly, or any other final comments or questions, or whatever, before we
Just
button
repeating
things up?
thanks, that this really has been really helpful, and the kismet has been amazing. There are 3 of us here from the mountains.
Yeah.
We know
I
about
love
studded snow tires.
Yep.
Oh,
I
yes.
love my mountain community.
They're a way of life.
Yep.
I'm going to stop recording. Kelly, thank you so much. That was really wonderful.
Thank you. And Steve and Laura have attended many of my workshops, so they can speak to workforce services as well. And they're the names in here that I recognized first thing.
Okay.